Writing about literature. Arguing about poems Part 3. Source: John Schilb and John Clifford. A brief guide to arguing about literature. Lecturer: Sami Babash. Please hit the notification bell for more content to come. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. 4. A checklist for revising. Element 1, Logic. Will my audience see that the issue I am focusing on is indeed an issue? Will the audience be able to follow the logic of my argument? Is the logic as persuasive as it might be? Is there more evidence I can provide? Do I need to identify more of my assumptions? Have I addressed all of my audience's potential concerns? Element 2, Organization. Does my introduction identify the issue that I will focus on? Does it state my main claim? Will my audience be able to detect and follow the stages of my argument? Does the order of my paragraphs seem purposeful rather than arbitrary? Have I done all I can to signal connections within and between sentences? Within and between paragraphs? Have I avoided getting bogged down in mere summary? Will my conclusion satisfy readers? Does it leave any key questions dangling? Element 3, Clarity. Does my title offer a good preview of my argument? Will each of my sentences be immediately clear? Am I sure how to define each word that I have used? Element 4, Emphasis. Have I put key points in prominent places? Have I worded each sentence for maximum impact? In particular, is each sentence as concise as possible? Do I use active verbs whenever I can? Element 5, Style. Are my tone and level of vocabulary appropriate? Will my audience think me fair-minded? Should I make any more concessions? Do I use any mannerisms that may distract my readers? Have I used any expressions that may annoy or offend? Is there anything else I can do to make my paper readable and interesting? Element 6, Grammar. Is each of my sentences grammatically correct? Have I punctuated properly? Element 7, Physical Appearance. Have I followed the proper format for quotations, notes, and bibliography? Are there any typographical errors? These considerations are listed from most to least important. When revising a draft, think first about matters of logic, organization, and clarity. There is little point in fixing the grammar of particular sentences if you are going to drop them later because they fail to advance your argument. As we noted, a group of Abby's classmates discussed her draft. Most of these students seemed to like her overall argument, including her main issue and claim. Having been similarly confused by the poem's shift of tense, they appreciated the light that Abby shed on it. They were impressed by her willingness to examine the poem's specific words. They especially liked her closing analogy between the reaper and the speaker himself. Nevertheless, the group made several comments about Abby's paper that she took as suggestions for improvement. 5. Abby's revision agenda. Ultimately, she decided that the following changes were in order. Number 1. She should make her introduction more concise. The first draft is so long and dense that it may confuse readers instead of helping them sense the paper's main concerns. This problem is common to first drafts. In this preliminary phase, many writers worry that they will fail to generate enough words. They are hardly thinking about how to restrain themselves. Moreover, the writer of a first draft may still be unsure about the paper's whole argument, so the introduction often lacks a sharp focus. After Abby finished and reviewed her first draft, she saw ways of making her introduction tighter. Number 2. She should rearrange paragraphs. After her introduction, Abby discussed the poem's last stanza in more detail. Then she moved back to stanza 1. Next, just before her paper's conclusion, she analyzed stanzas 2 and 3. Abby thought that the structure of her paper moved logically from the obvious to the hidden. The poem's last stanza emphasized the passage of time, and the earlier stanzas touched on this subject more subtly. Yet Abby's method of organization frustrated her classmates. They thought her paper would be easier to follow if, after the introduction, it moved chronologically through the poem. For them, her discussion of stanzas 2 and 3 seemed especially mislocated. Though she had positioned this discussion as her paper's climax, her classmates did not sense it to be her most significant and compelling moment of insight. Most important, they believed, were her comments on the final stanza, for that seemed to them the most important part of Wordsworth's poem. In other words, they thought the climax of the paper would be stronger if it focused on the climax of the poem. Abby hesitated to adopt her classmates' recommendation, but eventually she did so. When you read her final version, see if you like her rearrangement of paragraphs. Sometimes, though not always, a paper about a literary work seems more coherent if it does follow the work's chronological structure. And papers should indeed build to a climax, even if readers disagree about what its content should be. Number 3. She should reconsider her claim that this poem is ultimately pessimistic. Abby's classmates thought this claim did not fully account for the poem's last 2 lines, "The music in my heart I bore," long after it was heard no more. While they agreed with her that the words "no more" emphasize that the singer has faded into the past, they disagreed that her song is lost as well, for it remains in the speaker's heart. They noted that Abby had acknowledged this fact, but they felt she had done so too briefly and dismissively. In addition, one student encouraged her to think about poetry and music as ways of keeping memories alive. More specifically, he suggested that the speaker of the Solitary Reaper is Wordsworth himself, who is using this poem to preserve his memory of an actual encounter. After studying the poem again, Abby decided that her classmates' ideas had merit, and she incorporated them into her revision. Of course, such advice is not always worth heeding. Still, writers should accept the invitation to look more closely at whatever text they are analyzing. 6. Revised draft of a student paper. Here is the new version of the paper that Abby wrote. Attached to it are marginal comments by a teacher that call your attention to her strategies. Abby Hazelton. The passage of time in The Solitary Reaper. Notice here that the title clearly indicates the particular work being analyzed in the aspect to be focused on. Notice here how she immediately refers to specific detail of text. In William Wordsworth's poem The Solitary Reaper, the speaker enthuses over a girl who sings as she works in the fields. Throughout the poem, his rapture is evident. Notice here how she, with puzzling, signals issue to be addressed. Yet in the last stanza, he makes a puzzling move, shifting to past tense after using present tense in the previous 3 stanzas. No longer does he seem to be currently observing the singer he describes. Rather, now he seems to be recalling his encounter with her. One possible justification for this shift in tense is that it reminds us of the speaker's inability to halt the passage of time. Notice here how she identifies the main claim. Even though he would like to freeze the encounter, time goes on. Perhaps, therefore, the poem's real theme is that time is always in flux. Notice here how she connects feature of the poem to be focused on to other parts of it. Indeed, even before the final stanza, the speaker betrays an awareness that he can't bend time to his will. Notice here how she analyzes an implication of the poem's particular language rather than just beginning with a plot detail. Significantly, the poem's very first word is behold. In issuing this command, the speaker evidently hopes that other people will abandon all motion and gaze at the singer. The speaker reinforces this call for paralysis with the command that begins line 4, stop here. Yet, as if acknowledging limits to his control, he adds or gently pass. Notice here how she develops point that even the poem's early stanzas show concern about the passage of time that final stanza emphasizes. Besides referring to other human beings, these commands seem directed at time itself. The speaker hopes that time, too, will stop and behold. Even at this point in the poem, however, he realizes that time is inclined to pass, in which case he hopes that it will at least move on gently. Notice here how she moves chronologically through the poem, carefully pointing out how second stanza differs from the first. The second stanza is chiefly concerned with space. Comparing the girl's song to other sounds, the speaker ranges from Arabian sands to the seas among the farthest Hebrides. In the third stanza, however, he focuses again on time. Trying to determine the subject of her song, he expresses uncertainty about its time frame. Notice here how she makes distinctions among stanza's topics. Returned to main claim of the essay. He wonders whether the song concerns old, unhappy, far-off things and battles long ago, or instead deals with familiar matter of today. Moreover, even if he suspects the song's subject is some natural sorrow, loss, or pain, he is unsure whether this experience of despair is confined to the past or will reoccur. Notice here how she refers to actual words of poem to support points. Whichever of the possibilities he raises is true, the speaker is clearly limited in his ability to figure out the song's relation to time. Notice here how she ends paragraph by reminding us what main claim is. In other words, he cannot force time into a meaningful pattern, let alone prevent its passing. Notice here how she directs attention to part of poem with which she is most concerned. Simply by virtue of the shift to past tense, the last stanza indicates that time goes on despite the speaker's wishes. But other elements of the stanza convey this same notion. Recalling his experience of the girls singing, the speaker reports that he was motionless and still, yet in the very next line he admits that he eventually moved. I mounted up the hill. Notice here how she traces implications of poem's words, especially as these are related to main issue and claim. When the speaker says that the maiden sang as if her song could have no ending, the words as if are significant, implying that the song did end for him in reality. Similarly, the poem itself is to end at some point. In fact, it concludes with the words no more, which stress that the singer and her song now belong to the speaker's past. Only in his heart, apparently, can he retain them. Notice here how she connects last stanza to other parts of poem. This situation seems to leave the speaker as solitary as the reaper. Throughout the poem, actually, we don't see him in the company of others. His opening "Behold" is directed at no one in particular. Furthermore, we can't be sure he is speaking to actual passers-by or, rather, to the poem's hypothetical future readers. Nor, for all his praise of the singer, does he apparently talk to her. Rather, he gives the impression that he keeps at a distance. Even if he did converse with the reaper, he himself would still be solitary in the sense of failing to understand her dialect and failing to communicate her words to his readers. Notice here how several observations support idea that the speaker is isolated. As things stand, he is apparently unable or unwilling to reproduce any of the song's lyrics. Just as important, the medium of print can never convey the sounds of music. In fact, prior to recording technology, music was the most fleeting of media, its notes fading with each new moment. Notice here how she concludes climactic paragraph with substantial analysis. By seeking to transmit music, the speaker ensures that he will wind up being frustrated by time. Notice here how she signals that she is simply making a suggestion here, rather than asserting a definite new point. Yet perhaps the singer and her song are preserved in more than just the speaker's heart. It can be argued that they are also preserved by the poem, if only to a limited extent. More generally, we can say that literature is a means by which human beings partially succeed in perpetuating things. This idea seems quite relevant to the solitary reaper if we suppose that the speaker is the poet himself and that he actually witnessed the scene he describes. If we make such assumptions, we can see Wordsworth as analogous to the speaker. After all, both engage in commemorative verbal art. Notice here how she concluding paragraph reminds us of main issue and claim, but goes beyond mere repetition to bring up some new suggestions. Because time passes, the strain that Wordsworth and the singer produce in their efforts to preserve time are bound to be melancholy. Still, their art matters, for through it they are imaginatively heaping experiences that would otherwise fade. 7. The teacher's final comments on the draft. Abby's revision is more persuasive and compelling than her first draft. In particular, she has nicely complicated her claim about the poem's pessimism. Nevertheless, this revision is not the definitive version of her paper. Maybe you have thought of things Abby could do to make it even more effective. In presenting her two drafts, we mainly want to emphasize the importance of revision. We hope, too, that you will remember these specific tips as you work on your own writing. Writing about literature. Arguing about poems Part 3. Source: John Chilb and John Clifford. A brief guide to arguing about literature. Lecturer: Sammy Babash. Please hit the notification bell for more content to come. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.